If you've ever felt like you are running a three-ring circus, juggling a homeschool, that you're juggling all the activities and toddlers and your sanity, then this is the Homeschool Mom Chat for you. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about how to balance homeschool and life when you happen to be also a mom of littles. And also we're going to talk about how to incorporate an education into your toddlers stage. So I want to invite Morgan. She is here as a homeschool mom of three littles in Tennessee, and I invite her to join me now. Let's see if you're there. Homebound Hearts. If you haven't met her and you have toddlers, this will be heartening. So one of the things that I have learned, and it's been a long time since I've had, hi,
I'm on the
Morgan.
wrong camera. Hi. Sorry about that.
No problem, because you have toddlers.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Welcome to the
oh
crazy.
no, I was just saying that it's like juggling in a circus. Like you're just like, ooh, what's going on next?
Yes, that is
So I'm
absolutely
you put a
a
little
good
effort into
description.
that action. Thank you for that. And Nada, welcome. I also know you have twin toddlers. That might be next level.
Not quite. So I have a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old right now. So we had our 6 and 7. That was a fun season. When they were both toddlers, that was definitely the hardest. And I learned a lot from that
Yeah.
season. Having a 6 and 7-year-old with a toddler in the house is much easier.
Yes, I was just commenting on one of the gals watching us here. Hi, Nada, is a mom of three kids, and two of them are twins.
Oh, I'm so
Or
sorry. I thought you were saying I had twin toddlers. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, no, that's fine. I think that is. I mean, honestly, some kids. When I had my first child, I remember people saying, "Oh, there's that's such a sweet season." And they just like they'll just sit and read books and have fun, and I'm like, my child does not sit, my child does not just sit and read books like her friend
Yeah.
did. She is pulling everything off the cupboards, and I
Yeah.
felt like constantly running, which coincidentally was your experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I actually was like, the toddler years made me way more nervous than the teenage years. And like, I
yeah,
wanted to homeschool. But there was a big part of me that kind of wanted to just like fast forward the preschool years because I was like, I don't know what to do with them. Like the
yeah,
newborn phase is fun because you can snuggle and like I loved that attachment and being with them all the time.
yeah,
And then once they can read, it's fun because I'm very school
yeah,
minded. So I was very excited to like break out the textbooks and I was like a math major. So I couldn't wait to dig into like that advanced stuff.
yeah,
But the toddler years, I was like, I love you, but I don't like the toddler crafts and stuff that I would see on Pinterest and all the sensory bins. I was like, it just stresses me out. Like it
yeah,
just feels like a big mess. It feels like a lot of work for me, for maybe 5 minutes of play for them. And I felt very much at a loss. And I went through a season where I felt like I really just must be a bad mom because
mhm,
I'd go to my friend's house and she had 4 kids and all of them had every book on their shelf memorized because she would read to them so much. Like they could pick any book off the shelf and know all the words. And I was like, I don't enjoy reading children's books. So maybe I'm a bad mom. And then
I don't think
my
that's an
oldest,
average experience, actually. I don't
yes,
think.
I'm learning that.
Yeah,
And my oldest didn't like being read to, which also blew my mind because I was like, everyone says their kids love when they read books. And she, at 2 years old and even younger, she would come and close the book when I tried to read to her. Like I would try to sit on the floor and read while she was playing, and she was like, just stop with that nonsense. Like she would like to look at the pictures,
yeah.
but she wanted me playing with her or engaging with her, and she was almost annoyed if I was like reading something instead of giving her eye contact. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these kids.
Well, it's interesting that you said you're not afraid of, or you're not anticipating the teen years versus the toddler years. So I've had four toddlers and teens, so four in total. And I remember their toddler years. And I really do believe that when they come out of the womb or they get, placed into your arms for the first time, whoever they are then, that is who they are later. That's who they are at 10. That's who they are at 18. That's who they are at 23. And I can't say beyond that because my oldest is 23.
Oh,
But they're the same people. But when the toddler years were happening, I just remember feeling this phrase that actually Whitney Witten from Sensational Motherhood uses. She says, "I feel touched out, talked out, and I forget the rest of
Yeah.
it." But that is how it feels, like too much sensory overwhelm for mom.
Yeah.
And then teenage years, not necessarily every teenager, but it certainly brought up a lot of whatever the unhealed stuff is in you. Uh,
Mm,
buttons first of all, but they don't always try to use the buttons. They just unwittingly try or
yeah.
use the buttons, and then you discover a lot about yourself. So
Yeah.
yeah, say the toddler years, you're probably not experiencing that touched out, talked out thing when the kids just want to be left alone in their rooms on their own as teenagers. But so
Yeah.
tell me your wisdom. So here's the thing, I hear often, and I see this on threads a lot, people will say, "What should I do as homeschool curriculum for my kids?" And they're like 1 and 3. And then naturally, there's a lot of parents that will just say, "Don't do anything, just play, just read." And I definitely was that mom. I would suggest that approach for a long time. And I don't think that you need to make it difficult, but sometimes you want the structure and sometimes your child wants the structure. I'm curious what your experience of that storyline or that thread of discussion
Yes.
is.
Yeah. So the reverse of that, like the opposite of just play, I think people a lot of times see that as pushing school or forcing academics on your kid or like joining the rat race too soon. And my whole account is dedicated to providing a different perspective of that. So when my kid didn't want to be read to, she was clearly looking for a challenge. I mean, at 2 years old, at 18 months old, she was picking up a pencil. She would take apart a pen and put it back together. Or like
Yeah.
when she saw me writing, she was asking for the pen because she wanted to trace letters. She wanted to trace numbers. So I'm seeing that she's hungry for this, but I have no idea what to do with her. So when I turned to Facebook and I was looking to these homeschool groups, I was very frustrated by the just play advice because it wasn't enough for her.
Yeah.
And me just trying to encourage her to just play really just led to her being tied to my hip and then creating issues. Like she was looking for a challenge, and since I wasn't giving her one, she was making everything challenging. Like she was just constantly bucking the system, giving me lots of friction. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I know she's a sweet
Yeah.
kid and she's just
Yeah.
looking for a way to be challenged. And it more like our philosophy really came from my husband. Like we were on the same page before we had kids.
Yeah.
And then once I got exhausted in the toddler years and he's like, she needs more of a challenge, more of an academic challenge. You should be giving her something. And at that point, then I started to fight him. I was going with the like, I can't, like, I am maxed out. And in my mind, since she was bucking the system with all the little things, I was like, if I add something harder, then she's just going to be working against me and I'm going to be forcing this on her. And I just, in my mind, thought it was going to be a lot more friction.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wasn't going to have the emotional energy that I needed to give to my younger daughter. I kept on hitting brick walls and I like my way was not working and the advice I was getting from other homeschool moms was not working. So he started working with me of like, look, you're overthinking it. Just keep it super simple. We literally just started with a
Yeah.
notebook and dots on a paper. So
Yeah.
I would dot, dot, dot and the A sound and I would show her the A sound. And so we didn't do letter names. We did letter sounds from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I would dot, dot, dot the number one, and I draw a big one, like a big dot next to it. So she knew one means one. And then we did that with the numbers, and she loved it. Every time we sat down, like
Yeah.
we're in church, we're in the grocery store, every time she sees a notebook, she's asking me to dot her letters. And then she started dotting her own letters, like making her own A's and B's and 1, 2, 3s. So she was very happy with it. And I kind of skipped. The thing that we started with very, very first was memory verses.
Yeah.
I would just write a memory verse on a piece of construction paper, use a magnet to stick it to our fridge. And she wasn't very verbal, but she loved using her hands for sign language. So I would learn a couple of signs to go with each verse. And every morning, literally before we would eat, she'd be by my side, standing at the fridge while I'm making breakfast, and we're practicing our memory verse together. Every time she tried it, I let her put a sticker on the construction paper, and she again loved that. And what surprised me, that was when she was almost 3.
Mhm.
And then as she was 3 and my younger daughter was 2, my 2-year-old was learning the sign language for these verses even faster than my 3-year-old. So I was like, I wasn't even trying to entertain my 2-year-old, my younger daughter yet, but
Like
she
how,
was soaking it up
yeah.
too. So now their favorite thing was waking up in the morning. They couldn't wait to do their memory verse. these verses that I'm thinking are going to take us a week or two to learn, they're learning in 3 days because they're just loving it so much. So
Yeah.
the more I saw like how well they soaked things up, the more I was like, okay, my main job is not shoving things down their throat. My main job is looking at
Yeah.
where they're at
Yeah.
and making sure they always have the next step. Just making sure that they're on the brink of their challenge in a
Yes.
way that they love.
Yeah.
And my second daughter didn't love writing. Like I did a post about this the other day where she's very quick with numbers and she was very verbal. Like she's been
Yeah.
talking straight out the womb. So we do a lot of verbal conversation school with her. And when we do math, I write out the problems for her because she can solve it quicker than she can write it. She gets frustrated with her hand stuff. So it's just, I mean, as moms, we know our kids. And I think our biggest job is to look at them and give them the next step, whatever it may be, and make sure they always have a challenge in front of them
Yeah.
instead of belittling
Yeah.
them. And their behavior has gotten a lot better with that.
Yeah, I often use the word challenge in the hard way, because when I first started homeschooling, I began writing, and I began writing on a blog I called Capturing the Charmed Life, because I
Mm-hmm.
this homeschool life can be very charmed, but then also there are a lot of challenges. So I use that word in a different context, that you can transform your challenges into your charms. But I know what you're talking about. I literally sat here 5 minutes before we were chatting, or maybe 10 minutes, and I was recording a video on exactly what you're talking about, reimagining your homeschool to help you lean into child-inspired learning. What does an education look like in your home for your very specific child? Because you're not homeschooling a method, you're homeschooling a
Yeah.
child. And so, and really, I don't even like the word homeschool. I use it because everybody knows it.
Yeah.
But creating an education or raising up a child to be who they're really meant to be means that you are genuinely looking at that child. So if they're two and they're doing as you're experiencing, and then all of a sudden you're giving them these challenges and they're really engaging it and loving it and focused and probably not hanging on your curtail or your how do you
Right.
say curtail, whatever, hanging off you, then that might have been a useful thing.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest thing that we saw was that it changed her behavior for the whole rest of the day.
Yeah.
Like if we're doing this 10, 20, 30 minutes of engagement in the morning, it was literally like scratching an itch or filling a need for her to where then she was like, oh, then she went and did the imaginative play.
Beautiful.
Like for the vast
Yeah.
majority of the day, it was like meeting that need first.
Yeah.
And then I saw her tapping into creativity and she was more content to sit and do the sensory bends or whatever else. When I wasn't giving her that challenge first, it was like nothing would satiate her, or she was just bickering with her sister or pestering or
Yeah.
at my heels asking for
Yeah.
attention. But when I gave her that eye contact, when I gave her that the praise and like the excitement, and we started our day with that quality time and a challenge,
Yeah.
it was like she was more content the rest of the
That's
day. Her whole behavior changed.
exactly right. Yeah, I call it eyeball to eyeball
Mm,
time, where
mm,
as homeschool moms, it doesn't matter what kind of mom we are. We are just busy, and it doesn't take very much, even when you have your kids in your own home, to not have that eyeball to eyeball time. But as soon as you do, you give them the real concerted attention on their own terms, because they actually want to be engaging you, telling you about their dream last night or their Minecraft build or their whatever, and they've got your full attention, their full rapt attention, then they tend to go, okay, great, now I've got what I need, now I can go play.
yeah.
And so you're also acknowledging that when they have a challenge and they're satisfying that challenge each day, then they can go do something else as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's beautiful to see those dynamics. Even just with playing her with her sister too. Like there's been so many things that I felt like I was doing it to meet my oldest personality, but then it's been so much easier for the other two. They kind of just fall in line. And even
Yeah.
today, like when I get too focused on the older two, I do have a toddler power hour that I do with my
Oh,
youngest.
I love that.
But I'm not super adamant on doing it every single day.
Yes.
Um, but like today, I was focused on the girls, and he wants to be around while we're doing our math. And then he will come to me with his book and say, Mommy, can we go do school? I want to do school with you, Mommy. And he knows that's our one-on-one time. We take it out to the porch. And just if I ever start to lose sight of like maybe I'm leading this whole thing, they inevitably end up coming to ask for it because they enjoy it. They see it as a game, like a hard game we get to play every day together. They don't see it as something that's being forced on them.
Yeah, and that right there is the reason why this conversation that I repeatedly see on threads or in homeschool groups, that they say, well, don't you don't need to like force learning on them and force structure around kids. And I do get that. Like, you probably don't, I don't know, maybe you remember this book, but it's called Better Late Than Early do you know it? Okay. So,
It's on my reading list. I'm nervous to read it because it sounds like it flies in the face of everything I believe in, but I'm going to read it.
no, I don't think it does,
Okay.
actually. I don't think it does. I think that the way that I read it originally,
Okay.
maybe I would have seen it the way you were about to respond. But for me, it taught me that we don't need to be pushing kids into the formal structure. But to me, that's more about creating all the true homeschooled experiences, like trying to do all the structured format
Yeah.
in that's happening, or the
Yeah.
grades, the testing, the blah blah blah. All of
Yeah.
those things are school constructs, and they're not required in the home. I know sometimes that we, depending on state or province or country, we do have to speak or be responsible or accountable to somebody that might have certain expectations around those things. But I think there's a way to speak educationese, to learn how to speak in the education system, but also allow our children to play and pursue their
Yeah.
curiosity. But
Yeah.
I think this Better Late Than Early really taught me that you can take a breather. You don't have to try to create so much structure when they're super little. The culture speaks that and says
Yeah.
this is the only way they're going to learn is if we do certain things. But we, just like you said, you're actually individualizing. You're looking at that one child and saying, she needs something more. And so
Yeah.
you did it. And so to me, that actually is consistent with that book.
Okay.
And the way you're speaking about it is the reason I was like, we should talk, because I see the constant conversation that says, don't do anything,
Mhm.
play and read, which is true. And for
Yeah.
many kids, that might be enough,
Right.
but some kids, it isn't.
Yeah. And if my oldest personality had been different, I can see like our whole homeschool model and our philosophy might look very different.
Yeah,
But she came into the world
yeah,
hungry for a challenge.
yeah,
And I think the whole like, don't push it on them too early, almost it assumes that education or academics is something forceful at any point. And I say you shouldn't push it on them at any point. And if
yes,
you're coming at it like they say school isn't built for boys under 6. Well, school isn't built for boys over 6 either. Like not even a 6-year-old boy is going to want to sit at circle
yeah,
time and sit still in his chair. And I think if you come at it from an angle of I'm giving them tools to tackle the next challenge. Like I am not forcing them to fit into this structure. Like I'm teaching my 3-year-old letter sounds. So it's like, well,
yeah,
you shouldn't be forcing your 3-year-old to read. No, I'm not going to force my 9-year-old to read either. I'm going to give them tools and expose them to the next step. And if they lose interest, well, we move on and do the next thing. If we sit there and we practice this sound for 30 seconds and then he loses interest, we move on. But when
right.
you look at it as like, I'm going to equip them so that they can take the next challenge, they're never too young to be equipped. I mean, 6 months old, you're always trying to give them the next thing that will help them conquer the next challenge.
That beautifully said. I love that. I remember my very first child looking up at the mobile, and she was like 3 or 4 days old. And the way she looked at it was so intent. And I was right that she was unusual compared to my other kids. She was so intent that I knew she was going to learn differently. And I was totally right. So funny enough, you were talking about that first child and how you begin to create or craft a homeschool routine or an approach based on that child. And it's so true. It becomes the first child becomes the, okay, we're gonna, like, experimental child, I sometimes call her, but the one where you're like, I've got it figured, I've got all my ideas, my methods, and then you put it on them and then you realize, well, that didn't work, so we'll try something else. And then, but it's all focused on that child until you have another child where it doesn't work. So I
Yeah,
actually moved full on unschooling for 6 months because of my oldest.
yeah,
And then I realized my other kids were bored. And so then we came back and we brought in more structure. And I didn't even, this is the reason I have a hard time saying how long I've homeschooled, because even before I was officially homeschooling, I had my oldest in a private school. My second child was 2 or 3, and I was doing exactly what you're
yeah,
doing at home. Super
yeah.
curious.
Yep. And I feel like it's all a seamless transition. And when we start from the time that they can conceive a routine, like
Yeah.
we start with our memory verses, as soon as they can understand a routine and I notice that they're waking up wanting to know what to expect. Or like my son will go to bed asking me, he says, tell me when I wake up in the morning. And that's his way of saying, like, what are we going to do? I want to know what to expect. As soon as they're young enough to understand what to expect, we introduce a learning routine.
Yeah.
And then it seamlessly transitions into kindergarten or first grade. But all they know is I wake up every morning, I learn about God, and I learn something hard with mommy. And there's no backlash at kindergarten. There's no backlash at first grade. There's no backlash when they're reading chapter books, because it's just been a natural, very simple progression. And another reason we start teaching them how to read so young is for us, like people say, don't rush it. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to give them a longer time to play with letters. And it's like when they know what letter sounds are at 3, and we get to start playing these blending games to where we don't even have letters in front of us, but I'm saying, what rhymes with Matt and starts with And when we start playing with letters and words like that when they're so young, well, now when they're in kindergarten and they're wanting to read the instructions for something, there's not this frustration or like, I feel like that's rushed when they're just now being introduced and as a 6, 7, 8 year old, and they can comprehend so much and they can see my peers are reading or my mom is reading, but I don't even know what these letters mean. To me, that feels way more rushed than giving them the tools early and lots of time to play around with them before they can even conceive wanting to understand how to read.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I actually had one of my kids surprise me, and she was 3 and whole word reading. And I was like, whoa, whoa,
Wow.
whoa, slow down. But
Yeah.
actually, why? Just wanted to read.
Wow.
What big deal? It was my learning curve at the time that kids sometimes don't want to read because they don't want to read. It's just not in their natural,
Yeah.
whatever, the repertoire. But then there's other ones that are like, boom, I got it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're all very different. But yeah, I think what I hear you say too is something that I learned through Steve Demi's teaching. He's a Matthew C. You and
Love
I,
Matthew C. I
yeah.
would work for him if I could. I sing Matthew C's
We'll keep
praises
talking
forever.
probably. I actually sold my Matthew C curriculum this year. That was wild. It was such a rite of passage. I was almost in tears.
Oh yeah, I believe
It,
it. Yeah, so I grew up on Matthew C and then went on to get a math degree. So I credit Steve Demi with a lot of my
yay.
love of learning. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely cool. Oh, you'll just keep talking about him. It'll happen. But he actually taught me that concept of, okay, the goal is to have them understand a concept, not to have 3 pages of the workbook done today. And so if they don't understand something, then don't keep going.
Right.
But if they do understand something, don't force 3 pages on them. Like, just let's
Right.
go thing.
Yeah.
And that applies in not just math.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. I try to remind moms that a lot of times the problem kids in public school or in homeschool are actually the bored
Right.
kids. So a lot of times when you start to see, like my oldest is this way too, when she understands a concept, she will not do a review day. Like once she gets it, she wants the next thing, she wants the next challenge. And as a teacher, I want the satisfaction of perfecting it. I want the satisfaction of hearing her read the word said. Like 8 times in a row without issues before we learn the next word. But once she learns it, she will actually pretend like she doesn't know, or she won't like she refuses, to where I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe she doesn't understand. Like as a mom, you second guess yourself, like maybe she's really struggling, and you start to put all your red flags up of my kid is a real hard struggler, when in reality they're struggling with being bored. And like if you see that they grasp it, and then I introduce her to the next concept and the next concept, and then we sprinkle in review, she stays
Yeah.
engaged, she stays curious, she stays interested. And I think that's where a lot of moms make it harder on themselves than they have to too. When like as teachers, it's very validating to perfect a topic before you move on. But as a student, once you understand it, that feels like you're performing. Like when you're being asked to perform this thing that you learned instead of being in the learning. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
the learning
Oh,
mindset is a very different mindset than having learned something and having to perform it for somebody. And I think a lot of students don't like
right.
that.
Right.
But for lack of being able to communicate it, as moms, we just think that they're struggling, but they're actually just bored.
Yeah. And it's really hard to see, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like one of my kids, when I was in my 3 first years, where I was doing very classical homeschool, like the Susan Weisbauer well-trained mind homeschool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
First 3 or 4 years, I held out. I did it that long. and then I hit a wall. But
Yeah.
at that time, I saw all these things as valuable, and I do truly think there's a lot of benefit there, especially if you haven't been exposed to how to, think about different elements of an education. It's really useful and highly overwhelming, I won't lie. But there is there is a concept there about, what was it, narration. I think I first got it somewhere from her, not from Charlotte Mason. And so I would incorporate dictation, narration. And we would like sit and read for half an hour with my 8 and 6 year olds and younger kids. And we would sit and I would read, and then I would say, okay, I want you to write about everything that you remember.
Yeah.
The one kiddo that I unschooled, she was like, I don't have any time for this, but she still did it. But she was like, oh, my second daughter, who looked very academic to me, she did it, but grew up to tell me, what was the point of that? I didn't learn
Wow.
anything. So
Wow.
it's really interesting to hear your grown kids comment on certain things. And
Yeah.
with the hindsight that I have with all the kids that I've either helped coach the moms, because I'm a coach for homeschool moms, or for my own kids, I can see that everyone is very different in how they genuinely absorb things or understand things. And
Hmm.
I think the best example is when I was on the river recently with my husband, and we were kayaking and talking about all the things he loves, like, economics and politics and government and history and stuff. And then I said to him, when we saw a river otter pass, I said, what do you think they eat? I've never really thought about that before. And he's like, I have no idea. Well, we've seen them a lot. And he's like, yep, I don't know. So why do you think that you don't know? Because I don't care. And I'm like,
Right.
touche. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. From a different perspective, though, our approach, so we do classical too. We did classical conversations for 3 years.
Okay.
And I love, for little kids, I love how much they absorb through the songs.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like
Yeah.
learning everything through songs. Again, it takes us like 30 minutes in the morning to watch these YouTube videos,
Yeah.
which is like major stress off my back. I don't even have to coordinate the lessons. We're just sitting in our living room, learning the timeline song, which they're obsessed with, or in the car. It's like, wow, we
Yeah.
can fit our whole homeschool day into our breakfast hour on the TV or while we're driving in the car. So I still use all of their YouTube videos. I love the Homeschool Helper. Again, it's
Yeah.
really good for my 3-year-old. And now my girls are 6 and 7, halfway through multiplication, because we learned our skip count. Like, they've been singing these skip counting songs since
Yeah.
they were 3 years old. So
Yeah.
now when it comes time, it's like they're not starting from scratch. They didn't know they
Right.
were learning multiplication this
Exactly.
whole time. They're just singing songs with me, but now it clicks because they have that foundation. So I'm all about, like I said, just giving them tools in ways that are effortless for them,
Yeah.
that they don't even know how they're going to use it as they get older. So I really love classical conversations for that,
Yeah.
because it's like creating all these little cubby holes. If they ever want to dig down those passages, by all means. It's not our core curriculum anymore, but it's good to be exposed to all this stuff so you can find out what you're curious about. All that to say, I was just going to say our whole model is about giving them the academic tools early and kind of faster than most people would assume or appreciate, because then that opens up all of their room for their skills and their interests as they get older. Like, we've covered reading, we've covered a lot of math basics. We're going to have all this core stuff covered. And then as they get older, it leaves so much more time for answering questions, and they have all these tools to explore their interests
Right.
with, because we've covered it early.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was listening to my husband the other day. He's like, "What was that European country? It's close to Russia." And then he starts singing. Oh, I'm not going to sing it to you now because I'm trying to get myself to remember. But it was one of the songs that we were always listening to on a country song. Um, Slovakia, Slovenia. Okay, I'll just stop. But anyways, we were actually recounting the song that we were playing to our kids all that year, or way back, like 2 decades almost ago. And the other thing is, I still hear my kids sometimes do the periodic table song. So I'm
Oh,
with you
yeah.
on, yeah.
Yeah.
Me
It
now when
helps
I
a lot. Yeah, me either.
yeah.
Right now we're doing the preposition
Oh
song. They
yeah.
think that's the coolest. I think it's the coolest. I was like, I'm going to learn the hand motions with you this year so we can do the dance together. We love the preposition song.
I love that. Yeah,
Um,
that actually
yeah.
is just fun. So I'm with you there. But today I put out a podcast episode about balance. And if anybody knows me, they know that I actually like the word balance as a homeschool mom for the homeschool mom experience, because I don't think you can achieve it. There's never a
Mm,
fully achieved. It's not a thing. But if we can be present in all the things that matter to us, then it feels like we're having an experience of balance. So I'm
mm.
curious how do you do this? Like, how do you feel a sense of like, ooh, this feels really good and I feel present in what I'm doing?
Yeah, a lot of that. I mean, truly conversations with my husband. And that's one thing I bring back to light as well. I think a lot of moms who are struggling or feeling overwhelmed, I don't think we include our husbands enough. Every time I come to him for his leadership or I share my struggles, he inevitably provides clarity for me. And I am one to get distracted. Like I told you, I'm very academic minded. So I would lean towards the school at home left unchecked. But when I come to him and like we have our conversations, I quarterly am like, okay, this is what I'm planning on doing with my kids, with our kids. What do you think I should get rid of? What do you think I should focus on more? And to me, knowing I'm under his leadership, knowing that he's helping me come back to our priorities, it's like we waste zero energy on things that we don't think matter. And I think that's where homeschooling becomes a burden for moms or kids. When anytime you're doing a subject or a curriculum or book because you feel like you have to, it is going to be very heavy.
Yeah.
And we feel zero obligation. We like Bible is number one, super important to us. So we start with hymns and worship songs and memory verses. And there is nothing that gets me more excited than seeing my 3-year-old be able to recite a memory verse with the hand motions and get excited about it. So like that's naturally very exciting and it's very easy to be present for that. And it brings me tears of joy to hear my girls cleaning their room, singing hymns that we learned this week. And then I feel very passionately that learning how to read is so important so that you can read your Bible, so that you can learn whatever you want to. So there's zero heaviness for me and
Mhm.
giving them those tools.
Well, that's
And then math is just a big, just going through the lineup of like the things that we focus on. It's all because it's very close to my heart and I
yeah,
genuinely see the value in it. So when you can create your whole outline around your genuine values, and then I tell moms,
yeah.
and then lean into your strengths. I'm conversational. So we're not doing everything on worksheets. We're doing a lot through conversations. Videos make things easy for me. So I'm not afraid to put my kids in front of a YouTube video when I'm like leaning into my strengths and we love going outside. I'm super outdoorsy. So we take our school to the park almost every day. So when you start with your values and then you lean into your strengths, it's not heavy. Like it just, homeschooling feels like a reward for us, for
I
all of
love
us, I think.
that. That's beautiful. I hear that often about not wanting to include, whoever's partner into the conversation of homeschooling because we tend to say, okay, this is my role.
Yeah.
I'm going to do, I'm going to take this on. And it's not that I think that we don't, like, usually it is actually, not always. So I'm saying hi to you, homeschool dads, but I do know that it is often homeschool
Yeah.
moms. And yet do things like, say to ourselves that, well, we can't leave him with our kids because he won't do it the way that I do it, or if I come home after 2 hours and I left, then the house will be a mess, or you fill in the blank. But reality check is that we're partnered for a reason,
Yeah.
and these are children that are in a specific relationship with them. So we need to allow for that space and for that to develop independently and also take advantage of it so that you
Yeah.
can go somewhere, anywhere that's not the grocery store.
Yeah.
Because it's not really,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And I have a
yeah,
tendency to question myself a lot. And it is like homeschooling is going to be a lot of work no matter what. So when I start questioning, like, am I wasting my energy on this? Is this actually valuable for them? Having his leadership of knowing, like, no, I came to my husband and he doesn't just tell me, he explains it in a way that makes sense. But have even just knowing that every single thing that I do
yeah,
matters makes
yeah.
it easier to find the energy for it. Like it's very hard
Mhm.
to put the energy forth if you feel like you might be wasting your time or their time. But having that conversation with him consistently where he's pointing me back to like, no, this matters because dot, dot, dot. And then he inevitably really does lighten my load. I mean, I tend to take on more things than I should. And it's amazing when he's like, well, actually, you don't have to be doing X, Y, and Z. Actually, this thing is distracting you from your actual purpose. And this thing's too heavy for you. I'll carry it for you on the weekends. Like he always cleans things up for me. That's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I was making it harder than it had to be.
Yeah, yeah. I actually remember a moment where my husband checked me when I was premenstrual, so the week before, and I was
Mhm.
angry sweeping the floor. And I'm like, nobody's gonna do this except for me. So I'll just keep doing it, but I don't want to be doing this. And then he took a risk and came over and said, hey, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, of course I do. Who else is gonna do it? And he
Yeah.
said, but does it really matter? So he said something similar to yours. And he was right. I actually determined, yes, it does matter, but not every day. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a lot of that too. And I don't like housework. I don't like cooking.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things like I don't really like the homemaking side of being a homeschool mom. I love the school, and it's kind of been like a brick wall recognizing like, man, I got to take care of this house if I'm going to live in it all day. But there's been lots of little tweaks that we've made where he's like, don't keep the house clean throughout the week. Like literally bare minimum throughout the
It
week.
sounds
And then
like,
we make Friday our super clean day, and we like get everything cleaned up so that I can rest all weekend.
yeah,
And we've just learned like little shifts like that. And thankfully my family eats leftovers, so I cook in
I
bulk and we just eat the
love
same thing for
leftovers.
3 days. So we're learning to make little tweaks so that I
Yeah.
can focus my energy on the things that I am strong in,
Oh,
and be
yeah.
more
Yeah.
powerful there.
I think that if you have any capacity to hire someone for an hour or two a week, like it's worth it. It is
Yeah.
so worth it. Except I've told my kids that I will do it after everybody's left home.
Yeah.
Know what that's about, but anyway, I'm being sneaky. But I'd love to hear before we close. What are some things that you do to instill a little quiet or balance for you?
Yeah. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question well the
No,
first time.
yeah,
So for me, there are seasons. I definitely know that when I can go to sleep at a decent time and wake up before my kids, those are my strongest seasons.
yeah,
There are times where I'm so burnt out by the end of the day that I actually need quiet
yeah,
at the end of the day before I feel like I can even fall asleep. So I think one is just being honest. What season are you in? What is actually going to refill your battery? My husband laughed at me this weekend because I was telling him I was tapped out, and he's like, well, the kids are down for quiet time, just go take a nap. And I was like, no, because then I'll wake up and the quiet time will be over. And he's like, but you will have rested. I'm like, no, not the rest that I need. Like, I
yeah,
need to be awake and enjoy the
yeah,
quiet. That's
yeah,
really recouping.
yeah.
So we have mandatory 2 hour quiet time every single day. And it's been that way since forever. So now my kids are 6 and 7, or my oldest are 6 and 7. They know they still have to go entertain themselves in their room for 2 hours. Sometimes we let them play on the tablet, sometimes we don't. I'm trying to teach them more hobbies like sewing and things like that
Yeah,
so that they can
projects.
keep themselves
Yeah,
entertained. But the rule is if you have to ask a question, the answer is
yeah,
no. Like, I need 2 hours. You are in your room. If you're not sure what to do, take a nap. Like, this is my time to either be productive or recoup if I need it. And then, yeah, that Bible time in the morning. And I'm getting back into that season right now where I'll go to sleep early so that I can get up at 5, 6, whatever it takes, and read my Bible, pray. I
quiet.
make my list of how can I win today? For me, that feels better than a to-do list. Like, ways that I can
Yeah.
win today. I feel like I'm earning points for every little thing. And then when I can go into
I'm
my
gonna quote you
day
on that, Morgan.
knowing what I need to
Yeah,
focus on, I
yeah,
feel much better.
yeah. So you call it a to win list?
Yeah, I just like say ways that I can win
Okay.
today. And it's like, I know I might not get all of these things done, but I feel like I'm getting a point for everything I can check off. I won this, I won that.
I love that. I actually often call it a to live list instead of a to do,
Mm,
because our tendency is to say these are the things that I have to do to feel like I succeeded or something, or I
yeah,
did the right thing, or whatever it is that's valuable to you. But actually, I don't think it's about finishing the to do list, because now that my kids are almost all grown, I still have a to-do list. Okay. So it's always going to be there. But how valuable is it? How much time do I want to spend incorporating the to-do list? And how much time do I want to go outside and be with the animals or go kayaking with my husband or whatever? Time blocking your life, I think, really
yeah,
getting clear on what matters and include space for all the things that matter.
yeah,
And even though it's almost impossible, especially if you have toddlers, to get that quiet time or separate space away, if you can do
yeah.
that, energizing and creates fuel for the rest of your life.
Exactly. I will say one more thing that has been a huge game changer is we include them in chores from the very
Yeah,
beginning.
me too.
We make their little chore charts, and like I feel zero guilt over making my 3-year-old scrub the toilet. Like,
Well,
to them, it's a
they
game.
like it when they're three.
Exactly. They like it when they're
Yeah,
little, and we put on the fun music and
yeah,
we make it feel like a game, just like school. And I used to do everything, and then I would get sad because I was like, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I feel like I'm missing my kids because I'm spending so much time cleaning up after them and cooking them. I was like, why am I would get jealous because my husband would come home and play with them, and I was like, you literally played with our kids today more than I did because I did
yeah,
school and then I was busy all
yeah.
day. Um,
Common.
and my dad was like, well, you're punishing yourself. You're treating yourself like you have to get everything done before you can spend time with your kids. Include them in the work, and everybody wins. And it has been way more fun that
Beautiful.
way.
wonderful. Yeah, because I actually find even now I'm at the place that I'm at, and a family life, and three of my four kids are grown and launched, and I can see that the dirt, the dishes, the floors, the entire thing, it still continues with you. But at this point, you're like, oh, you're still here. The kids aren't, but you are. Well, I just don't care anymore. I just don't care. And I don't like, and I because I don't know, some element of it is self-care, so I will say that it feels better. And I actually read that there's research that says that women are especially more sensitive to that of disarray, and it really does reflect what's going on inside of you and how in
Mhm.
at peace or in control you feel of your life based on what's going on around you outside. Having
Mhm.
said, am I going to spend my entire days, wiping every surface of the dirt or the dust or shining taps like I did when I was 20? Heck to the no. I'm not time walking that level of clean. So it'll just be what it is. I like my
Yeah.
house, my life, but I like to do kayaking more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a great
Yeah.
point. And yeah,
Yeah.
just recognizing its trade-offs and taking that empowerment back of, yes, I get
Yeah.
to choose
What
what's more
matters.
important to me, sweeping the floor right now
Yeah.
or getting a little bit of sunshine. Well, I actually really want to go outside. So let's just do that. We have more freedom than most of us will admit or believe.
Really do. We really do. We just don't tell ourselves we do. And we just have to assess, why is it that we think that what we're doing is the stuff we have to
Yeah.
do? Are we doing
Yeah.
it because somebody else, like the, conventional ideas about what education or even motherhood looks like? Or are we doing it because it really matters to us? Or are we doing it because somebody else is telling us that this is valuable? Or is it because we think it's important? And it is actually important to assess that regularly. But
Yeah,
I'm curious,
absolutely.
last thoughts, what you would say to encourage homeschool moms of toddlers. Any thoughts? Just
My
do it.
biggest, what do you say? Just do it.
Just
Yeah,
don't do it.
I mean, no, do it. Do it. Definitely do it. My biggest encouragement is like you as the mom know truly what your kid needs. And
Yeah.
it's very easy to get overwhelmed on the internet of the advice from everybody else. But if you just block all of that out and start with a blank piece of paper and ask yourself, first of all, what is valuable for my kid to know? And secondly, what do they seem interested in and how can I challenge them in that next level? Like that will write your homeschool curriculum for you. You do not need as many resources, advice, or anything that you think. You really do know what they need
Yeah.
just from paying attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Really paying attention to them. And I always add and pay attention to yourself and how much bandwidth you have.
Oh yeah,
Be honest. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I literally was just talking about that on the video that I was making, that reimagining your homeschool. So I built a mini course around this, all the 8 elements that I see that make a happier homeschool mom. And it's always to child inspired learning and deschooling or coming away from unhelpful schooled mindsets.
Mhm.
I really appreciate the thoughts that you've shared around toddler education, because even though we tend to think, oh no, don't give them reading or don't do anything more than reading and play, really thinking differently about education for toddler, you really brought that home today. So I really appreciate you being,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. This was such a fun conversation. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you having me on.
Well, you're welcome to join anytime. I'm
Of
here 1
course.
EST every Tuesday and on
Wonderful.
Instagram. You'll find it over on my YouTube channel afterwards. I'll definitely
Oh,
tag
cool.
you. You can use it in whatever way you want. But if anybody has any questions about toddlers, head over to Morgan because
Yes.
I'm sure you have lots of time to answer them.
I really do.
You do?
I get up in the morning. That's one of my focus. I love to be in my
Ah,
DMs and respond to any questions as they come in because I didn't feel like there were good resources when I was there
ah,
asking the questions.
non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you,
Thank
Morgan. And
you. It's nice to meet you too.
yeah, have a great day.
We'll see ya.
Bye.